Welcome to Sharp Sharp. This is our 15th episode, and we're recording this on Wednesday, the 8th of July, 2026. We're recording this the day after Argentina came back from the absolute dead to beat Egypt in a game they seemed destined to lose, but before England plays Norway, or more accurately, tries to defend its castle against the marauding Viking Erling Haaland. Still to play, Argentina, Norway, everyone's in it. The World Cup looks fascinating. Zooks, it's been a fascinating week of watching football and watching the Democratic Alliance implode and watching the ANC trying to defend itself against claims it keeps appointing charlatans to the role. How was your week?
Yeah, it was brilliant. It was brilliant. Last week, I spoke about giant killings, the classic World Cup, where you want to see big teams getting knocked out. People with loss of budget just getting kicked out by ordinary teams. I mean, what Norway is doing is just amazing. I think the whole world now is behind Norway. Very impressive. Portugal is out. Ronaldo gone. Brazil is out. Can you believe it?
So we have a couple of topics to discuss with me, Rob Rose from Currency News, Zukile Majova from Scrolla, and we have Patrick Smith from Africa Confidential, which is, as I said before, a fabulous publication. I think we should all subscribe to that and subscribe to this podcast and basically make sure you get the benefit of the intellectual gravitas around me. Not me, of course, but the gravitas around me. Guys, so welcome. Perhaps if I can start with the Democratic Alliance, South Africa's second largest party, which is now a cornerstone of the Government of National Unity. Zooks, there've been lots of claims in the past week that the Democratic Alliance, now in power as part of this coalition government, has been using its influence through its former leader, Tony Leon, to secure favorable treatment for himself. Essentially, Tony Leon's company, Resolve Communications, represents a whole number of clients like SpaceX. And what they've done is they've managed to secure audiences with several government ministers. Tony Leon himself says, well, this is just how lobbying works. But I suppose the conflict of interest is that Tony Leon himself was a former leader of the party and somebody who helped, craft the coalition government, the Government of National Unity structure. So the issue is, is he using his influential position to ensure favorable treatment for his clients? It's fascinating to find a scandal emerging from the DA, right, Zooks?
Yeah, it's quite interesting, Rob. A lot of people are questioning how everything DA tends to be very smooth until somebody crosses the line and gets kicked out, and we don't really get the full details of exactly what happened. You'd have this very promising person that you would think has got an ability to bring in some black middle class graduates, someone like Lindiwe Mazibuko, Musi Maimane, and a whole lot of them. You remember Edmund Mashaba come from the DA, and suddenly there is a little bit of a riff-raff and somebody is gone, But right now, this dirty laundry seems to be coming out and being washed right in front of everybody's eyes, and it's bit by bit. It's not like the whole thing, it's just bit by bit. I mean, a scandal like that, if you keep a scandal like that, it's going to go on for weeks. And if a scandal goes on for weeks, it hurts very hard. And we're just a few months away from an election. It's very bizarre, Rob, very, very bizarre indeed.
I mean, the thing is that what makes this different is that this is the kind of thing that you'd think that the ANC or other political parties would have lobbed at the DA. But actually, what drove this issue out into the public is that it came from within. It came from John Steenhuisen, the former leader who raised this in an interview with Adrian Basson from News 24. So the point is, for the DA to be the subject of scandal is itself quite different. But the fact that the scandal mongering comes from within illustrates a factionalism in the DA that I've never seen before. Does this change the nature of how that party has interacted?
First of all, Rob, let me tell you, I was very impressed on the eve of the DA conference to hear that a deal has been struck between John Steenhuisen and the incoming leader, Geordin Hill-Lewis. This is how you manage, at least at the time I thought, this is how you manage these things, and a new leader comes in, because now the old leader is still, at the time, was still in government and quite powerful, representing the GNU, leading the GNU in government as Minister of Agriculture, etc. And everyone was wondering, how is this transition going to happen? And to hear that the two gentlemen had struck a deal was quite impressive. I thought, other people must take note. This is how you do it. And now it's gone horribly wrong. John Steenhuisen feels hard done. He says there was a deal in place. He feels that he is being backstabbed. It's gone horribly wrong, Rob. We thought this would be an example. It's not the example. Um, yeah, and he's even talking about he's getting the treatment that other black leaders like Musliman and others who have left. That this is the kind of treatment that they got. It's really bad. Obviously, Geordin Hill-Lewis is going to design his own party. The guy is going to be around for another 2 terms. So we are looking even beyond 2029 election. So he's still going to be around for a long time. He needs to shape a new DA the way he wants to shape it. He's young. Young people, especially young black graduates, are looking at him and trying to see how different he is going to be. And one did not expect the likes of Tony Leon to come out at this point and being presented as still very powerful within the DA. It's a different thing now to have those people and the new DA. Geordin Hill-Lewis has got a tough job coming up, I can tell you that.
I mean, to me, it looks like there are 3 things that are different about this particular moment. Firstly, it illustrates kind of the factionalism in the party that you thought the party with strict disciplines might have been above. But secondly, this might also be, I suppose, the inevitable consequence when you have access to power, such as the DA now has through the communications ministry, through being the deputy minister in finance, trade and industry, and agriculture. So perhaps this is just what happens when some people now have access to power. Is that part of it?
That a lot of it is that. First of all, the factions destroy political parties. I mean, what is happening in the ANC, apart from the competence or ability or lack of political will to deliver and all of that, factions will destroy a political party. In the ANC, they go way back to the mid-90s. Jacob Zuma and Thabo Mbeki used to be in the same faction. When their friendship collapsed, it destroyed the ANC and continues to destroy it. So if the DA is in that territory now, they are in serious trouble. Quite interestingly, Rob, is that the DA is going to continue now to be involved in power with a lot of money involved. If you are looking at what everyone is thinking, that the DA is going to lead a coalition that will run Johannesburg, we're looking at a 90 billion rand municipality that is actually having an infrastructure backlog of around 200 billion. That's a lot of contracts, Rob. And you would assume that contracts would be dealt the way that Cape Town does it. Now, to have certain figures in the background trying to influence who gets a tender, who doesn't get a tender within the DA, this is a problem, Rob. This is a big problem.
I mean, the other thing that I thought was relevant about this particular scenario is that it's now, the eye has been off the ball when it comes to leadership. Helen Zille has always been a firm hand on the party for the last 15, 20 years. But the point is now she's got her eye focused on Joburg, which leaves, the people to squabble below her. And I think that might be a factor. Do you think that that's playing any role in this current spat between the former leader and the current leader?
Rob, the DA is becoming huge. It's becoming a humongous party. I saw they've got an office here in Mount Frere. I'm in Guapata in the Eastern Cape. For the first time, I saw a DA office somewhere in town. That tells you it's growing. It's going to have branches all over the place. To run a party like that, let's say something with 2,000 branches, that's a lot. You need to run it full time. And I'm looking at Geordin Hill-Lewis and the task that he's facing, that they need to seriously have a structure that's going to run the party permanently, fight by-elections. And you can see now by-elections are literally every week, So you can't be mayor of Cape Town and leader of a new DA that you are bringing in a new ethos, a new strategy, a new thinking, rebranding the DA, and think you can still run Cape Town. These are things that Geordin Hill-Lewis must seriously consider and do so very quickly.
Can I ask, it's fabulous to have you on the show, Patrick. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but it'd be fabulous if you could just sort of share some sort of thoughts on the wider issue, which is that people leave government parties and then they set up their own communications companies or they set up other companies and then have to do business with the very state that they had an influence on earlier. I mean, you've seen this in so many other countries, and it's led to similar scandals. I mean, how are you supposed to manage a thing like this?
Yeah, we see it right across Europe. We see it in many other African states. And I guess part of it comes down to the fact that there's no very clear career for politicians. You get to power, you get access to resources, and then you lose power and you lose access to those resources. You're scrambling around. And I think what we've seen across the world is just a lowering of standards when it comes to insiders marketing their political connections. We used to, they used to call it the revolving door in Washington. You work for the State Department. You work on, say, the Angola dossier in the State Department. Then you come out, and what do? You get a job with a lobby firm that's lobbying on behalf of the Angola government, and you get the contract. That used to be frowned on in, say, Britain, but it's now become, to put a time on it, actually, it would probably be, I think, the Blair government period. We just saw a lowering of these standards. So we had a mass privatization program, the same thing. All of a sudden, people who had been working for state enterprises suddenly left those state enterprises, went to the private sector, using that knowledge. Rob, I think it's a matter of it's regulation. The problem is the politicians who are gaining from this sort of, the marketization of their insider knowledge don't seem to have any incentive to regulate it. So we need forces outside politics, I think, to step up the demands for this, because I think it is eating into the body politic in a lot of societies, obviously including South Africa.
I mean, you're right about that particular period. I think there was a period just after Dick Cheney, I think, was the deputy president in the States, and there was all this discussion about Halliburton and the defense contracts involving Iraq. But I think the Trump era has taken it to a new level where there's been mass conflicts of interest and the politicians have given up caring, which leads to a kind of a normalization of this kind of thing, do you think?
What's going on with the Trump administration? The message is, we've paused the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act now. And a lot of European businesses are saying, well, if the Americans are pausing the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, maybe we should do the same. So I think we're just looking at a general lowering standards. And that's, going to be a race to the bottom.
I mean, in defense of Tony Leon, one of the things you do develop when you're there is you get an understanding of how power works and you get a great network of contacts. So in a sense, what you then do is that is your political capital. That is your capital. So should you be barred from using it? I mean, in a sense, you could say you should absolutely be allowed to use it if it makes society function better, provided you don't cross any red lines. Is that not like you say, better regulation and then it's should be allowed? I mean, that's how lobbying works to some extent, which is essentially organized corruption in many people's eyes.
I think a lot of that could work, Rob. In this particular situation, you ask yourself, if the Minister of Communication was an ANC minister, how much influence would Tony Leon have or think he has in that particular department? So you seem to be getting a lot of conflicts of interest as far as that is concerned. Otherwise, we all parties have got problems. What do you do with former politicians? And you end up recycling the bad guys,
Yeah. Well, I mean, Zux, that brings us to our second story, which is essentially you talk about ANC politicians attacking the DA over allowing this form of what they said was capture, but you have a far more blatant example in the case of Dina Pule. Now, I wrote about this case back in 2013. I was a part of a team of journalists who wrote about, amidst much fightback from Pule about how her department had lent on a number of mobile companies when she was communications minister to donate money for an ICT conference, which they duly did, of course, because the minister calls you and says, we need money for this. And then a whole lot of that money disappeared, it seems, into the pocket of her boyfriend. I think it was something like 10 million at the time. Now, this was not sort of, airy-fairy discussions about ethical conflicts and do you have knowledge. I mean, this was, Parliament said she had lied. They recommended she be booted out, and she was fired by, of all people, Jacob Zuma. I mean, once you've been fired by Jacob Zuma, does that not indicate you should vanish entirely? I mean, he's not a guy known for acting against miscreants, you know? So, and now you have a ludicrous situation, Zooks, where Cyril Ramaphosa, the New Dawn, the Tumamina guy, brings back Dina Pule as the social development minister. I mean, what does this say about the normalization of corruption in our politics? And I suppose the deep hypocrisy of a man who promised to sweep the floors clean.
Yeah, right from the beginning, the whole strategy of cleaning the ANC, introducing a step aside rule looks very nice. If applied properly, it looked like it was going to take some people out. And it took people like Ace Magashule. I mean, you have a sitting Secretary General being taken out, and by step aside, just by being implicated in corruption. But the criticism has always been there that the Ramaphosa regime tends to use these laws against certain people who are against them or different faction and all of that, but very kind to other people who are who are not very good. This is a classic example of returning Dina Pule. Dina Pule is seriously bad news, and she's replacing somebody, Sisisi Tolashi, president of the ANC Women's League, quite powerful within the ANC, but she was really, really bad. And again, Ramaphosa had to be forced to actually remove her, and now they are going on sort of defending the Dina Pule discussion. Everybody is appalled. And they're saying, Fikile Mbalula was saying that Dina Pule is now a new lady. She's a changed person. The government has got very horrible people, including ex-gangsters who have become ministers like Gayton Mackenzie. What on earth are we talking about here?
I mean, it's really fascinating because, I mean, like you say, her predecessor, Sisi Tolashe, I mean, she essentially was an ANC Women's League president, and that's the thing that Ramaphosa wants, is a support of the Women's League. But she essentially was booted out because, I think car companies donated a whole lot of cars to the ANC Women's League, which, surprise, surprise, ended up being driven around by Sisi Tolashe's family. I mean, that's why she was fired. I mean, it's amazing to just put somebody else in a role. I mean, this just says that you have complete disregard for international investor community. And I suppose institutions like the World Bank and all of those guys, S&P ratings that talk about the need to have a clean country. I wanted to ask Patrick, do you have a sense that the world realizes quite how bad this is in terms of this? I mean, I have a sense that Ramaphosa and the government just feel, we'll just, do this, it'll shore up this particular political frailty, vulnerability, and nobody will notice. But do you think the rest of the world does notice when this kind of thing happens?
It's a few insiders, because if you look, Rob, I mean, going back, to what seems like ancient history now, you mentioned Jacob Zuma and the Guptas. You think how long that lasted and how many international organizations came in and sort of normalized it. You had the McKinseys, the Bain Capitals, and the rest of them saying, well, these are the ground rules. This is how these people are running the economy. Who are we to start preaching to them? Let's just sort of pile in and get the contracts and deploy our local people there and look the other way. And so I think people do know what's going on, at least the decision makers when it comes to the big corporations and the governments and so on. They know pretty much what's going on because they have to for all sorts of compliance regulatory reasons. But I think they're very willing to turn the other eye or turn a blind eye to what's going on. And you see that right across the emerging, developing economies. If there's big money to be made in some of the fast growing countries, whether it's Brazil, Nigeria, Indonesia, or India, they will pile in. I think they know what's going on. So with South Africa, I think the calculus is not so much should this or should this not happen. To what extent is it holding back the economy, and to what extent are we going to be reputationally damaged by it?
I think one of the big problems that we're facing in South Africa is a situation where the government tries to manage ANC problems using government positions and all of that. If you look at this social development ministry, the only man, the last time there was a man there, it was Zola Square a long time ago when Thabo Mbeki was president. Since then, the ANC Women's League has been able to lobby and take over this portfolio. It now clearly belongs to the ANC Women's League. You can go back. There was Edna Molewa at some point. They had Bathabile Dlamini. Yeah, she had all sorts of problems. And confessed that everyone in the ANC has got their own Smolanyana skeleton, and you don't want to go there. Otherwise, those skeletons will come out. And then we had Susan Shabangu, not very good as well. Lindy was Zulu. A very bad track record there. And then we just spoke about Sisisi Tolashe, who's being replaced now by Dina Pule. And that tells you this is an ANC Women's League portfolio. I'm not sure how much room. Ramaphosa has got to be very tough. But then now, in terms of the conference, they split at the ANC conference. The last one, the ANC Women's League was with Ramaphosa. And in the conference next year, it looks like it could be very, very tight. She will need, Ramaphosa will need, at least a Ramaphosa candidate will need those votes of the ANC Women's League. So they remain quite powerful in that way.
It looks to me like Ramaphosa has entirely given up with pushing his agenda of a new dawn. But that's, you can understand. In a sense, he's looking inwardly. It's like, protecting factions. But that isn't good for the country necessarily. It's good for Ramaphosa, but not anyone else. Guys, let's talk about our third topic, which is we've, covered DA Gate, we've covered Dina Pule Gate, and xenophobia Gate, which is the third one, which has been the ever-present scandal of the last couple of months. Patrick, we had the deadline given of June 30th last week, which went off, without much bloodshed, which was a good thing. But you discussed a lot about that in the weeks leading up to it, but I wanted to ask your thoughts on this particular moment and how it's been perceived across the continent, I suppose, in the wake of this, which didn't cause a mass bloodshed, like I said, but it's going to certainly ricochet down for the next couple of months, and it's certainly shaped the way South Africa is thought of in the continent.
Yeah, I think there was a general sigh of relief, obviously within South Africa and beyond, about the fact that it didn't erupt into something really horrific. We were hearing the most horrendous forecasts of kind of a repeat of July 2021, sort of insurgency in KwaZulu-Natal, but directed very much against perceived foreigners. When that didn't happen, I think people, there was exhalation of breath for certain. The focus is back really on Ramaphosa, I think, after this. But it looks like it's going to be much more of a challenge now, as you pointed out last week, because these deadlines are going to happen every week. There's going to be a march are going to be on the streets every week, trying to ramp this up ahead of the local elections.
It was fascinating because Patrick, you sent an article which was talked about how South Africa's $30 billion contradiction, exports goods to Africa, then expels Africa's children. I thought it was a really fascinating discussion about how it seems inevitable to some extent, and it's naive of people to think that if you export all your goods across the continent, that people are not going to make their way into South Africa. And to some extent, this notion that there was always going to be a greater integration seemed implied in trade opening up. And yet South Africa seems so uncomfortable with the obvious implication. Is that what you take from that as well?
Well, yeah, but this uncomfortable feeling that's been growing, it is fairly recent. I think what I took from the article a bit was the parallels with Europe, in the sense that, Germany, for example, was by far the biggest economy in Europe, and the northern economies have been stronger in Europe, and there was huge sort of migrant sentiment, actually against Eastern Europeans coming initially from places like Poland and Czechoslovakia and Hungary, because those economies are actually doing very well now. But there was this, so I think it's within the continent. There's a sense, definitely, of this thing not being well managed, and the early aspirations of post 94 South Africa with this sort of panoply of Pan-African institutions. You had South Africa, in Durban in 2002, Mbeki Mandela was there, Mbeki, Obasanjo, Abdoulaye Wade, Abdulaziz Bouteflika all the continental leaders assembled in South Africa, born again African Union, African peer review mechanism, all these things. And it was like, continental government. That was the approach. And it all of a sudden, people were talking about Africa following the European Union model of a sort of political and economic union. But I think as this guy pointed out in the piece I sent to you guys, the economic groundwork wasn't done. The most important bit of the puzzle, the African continental free trade area, came after all that. It was almost like an afterthought. And I think what Europe's experience told us is that you've got to bring together people with some sense of common interest, just like the Germans and the French detested and were suspicious of each other, but they agreed to have an iron and coal federation to start off, pooling their resources in the hope that it would lead to better understanding, more trade. And I think that's got to be the pattern. But those hard yards haven't really been covered yet, I don't think, by the African governments.
To quote from that article, there are a couple of lines which I think are really quite poignant. It says, the African migrant in South Africa is not the cause of South Africa's crisis. It is evidence of a regional crisis, evidence that Southern Africa has failed to build balanced industrial development, and that the post-apartheid foreign policy spoke the language of liberation while actually practicing the language of dominance effectively. And until Africa confronts that structure, these episodes of xenophobic violence will just repeat themselves and the victims will be migrants. Zux, do you think it does speak to the deeper issues we've spoken about, all the issues that need to be addressed politically for this thing to end, but it does make South Africa pretty unlikable across the continent. This bully boy arrogance that is demonstrated here. Do you think I know you are fantastically likable, but do you think South Africans across the continent in general are seen as unlikable? I am seen as unlikable. That's one of my big issues, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Rob, this is something that...
You being unlikable, mate. That's so hurtful. My God,
This has to be managed very quickly, Rob, because South Africa's influence in the continent is going to change if we continue like this. I'm even thinking about what happened in Zimbabwe. Mnangagwa extending his term. Normally, previously, you would have South Africa saying, look, we want a situation in Africa where people do 2 terms and all of that. That was at a time when the Mbekis were quite powerful in the continent. And now people like Mnangagwa next door think that they can do this and get away with it. And there's not much we can do at the moment in terms of where our standing in Africa. I don't see ourselves as becoming influential. This is a huge concern. This is a huge concern. It's got serious implications, like I'm saying, Rob. Obviously, if we can't fix Zimbabwe, what is happening in Zimbabwe, those Zimbabweans will have to come to South Africa and do trade and all of that. And again, back to xenophobia problem.
To I suppose to end off this particular issue and to grasp at any kind of something that might resemble a silver lining in the darkest of lights. Patrick, do you not think that the African Continental Free Trade Agreement might present an opportunity to change the nature of South Africa's relationship with the rest of the continent and kind of rebalance this relationship to the extent it doesn't lead to this paternalism, this parochialism, and this kind of, I suppose, very constrained relationship with the rest of the continent?
It's got to. I think in the longer term, it's the option the continent is faced with. If you want to grow your economies, you've got to trade more with each other and build up cross-border economic cooperation. But that really requires a lot of trust. We saw it. We've been trying to put this free trade area together. Ramaphosa had to take a flight to go and convince the Nigerian president, Buhari, to sign the agreement, because Buhari is worried about cheap cars coming in from Morocco, threatening the Nigerian car industry. These are not unique issues to Africa. All these continental free trade areas, like the Mercosur or European Union, they've got these same rivalries. But but I do think, it just will require serious political will. Last time I asked people from that era, I asked ex-President Mbeki about it, and he said the problem is, since we started all this stuff in 2002, all the governments have been so obsessed with internal politics, we've become a lot more parochial, and we're not really thinking about the big picture anymore. So someone somewhere on the continent has to really start the focus going. And I think maybe the continental free trade area as a kind of coming together, convergence of interests might be the way to tell the constituent governments there's some mutual benefit. If you team up, cooperate, boost trade with each other, you're all going to benefit. And, if you convince people to go that route, then I think, that will make the difference.
Oh, that's a silver lining as we get on the show, I think, but it is fantastic.
Yes. It's not going to happen next week, but maybe the week after.
Just to end it off, you don't have to be likable to be successful. One of the best things around at the moment is the World Cup, run by the most unlikable and corrupt organization I think we've ever seen, which is FIFA. And the US at the moment is 250 years old and currently run by possibly the most corrupt president. I wouldn't say possibly. I think easily the most corrupt president in history.
Fantino.
The model for why politicians need to go and train at the mafia, I suppose. But it's been despite that, Zooks, it's been a fabulous tournament. Who do you fancy in the final?
Yeah, look, I'm all about culture. I like what Norway has brought to the World Cup. They brought a lot of culture. They're educating people about the kind of people they are and all of that. We like that. Obviously, Morocco is still in the World Cup. Who knows? No one is saying that Africa could win this World Cup. We actually could.
Well, we nearly knocked out, I suppose Egypt really nearly came inches away from knocking out the world champions Argentina yesterday. Patrick, your thoughts? Who's going to be in the final?
God. Well, I have to say, I think it's with my sort of other place that I stay in, France. I say France is still pretty in there with a good chance. We'll see what happens with Morocco. It would be great actually for Africa if Morocco win, because they're, as you all know, they're going to be hosting it in 2030. At one point, I would just say we've got to give a shout out to Cape Verde. I was in a bar in Paris with some very good friends, and our attention was just directed towards the Argentina Cape Verde match on Friday. The reason was because all the French people in the bar just wanted to get their revenge in first on Argentina and see them sort of humiliated by this country of 500,000 people who were playing the most brilliantly inventive and unpredictable football in the tournament. I think it's so sad that they didn't make it, but they damn near dearly made it on Friday. It was just epic, and I say everyone in Paris seemed to be cheering for Cape Verde that night. And let's hope this is the beginning of a great new footballing identity for Cape Verde, because I don't think any of us are going to forget that in a hurry from this tournament.
So I think next time we'll do Shop on tour in the bars of Cape Verde. That sounds like a great thing to do.
Svezera Avoria. Beautiful songstress. Yeah.
That's all the time we have for today. Please remember to subscribe to Sharp and tell your friends about us. Tell your friends about Africa Confidential, Currency News, Scrolla, and subscribe to us all. Otherwise, our plans for world domination will fail and we'll have to become politicians.
Sharp.